Hello, everyone. Greetings from Eretz Yisrael. Greetings from Israel. I was hoping to actually be able to pre-record the Mishnayos that I would be missing while I'd be away, but for a number of reasons, that didn't happen. So I'm going to try to to record the Mishnayos from Eretz Yisrael, either per day ahead of time, and we're going to try to go Mishnah by Mishnah. So here we are learning Mishnah Yuma, Parak Hey, chapter 5, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah 6. Now, the previous Mishnah, I've been discussing how the Kohen applies the blood onto the horns, which were at the corners of the altar. There were those korbanos, like the ones that were brought, the sin offering that was brought on Yom Kippur. That blood was put on the corners of the golden altar that was inside of the Beis HaMikdash building. Then you had other chatos, other sin offerings, not on Yom Kippur, other times, that actually there were other times other than Yom Kippur, certain sin offerings that their blood was also applied on the corners of the golden altar, as is done on Yom Kippur. And then you had the sin offerings that the blood was applied to the corners of the outer altar, the altar that was in the courtyard. So now the Mishnah says, after completing that application of the blood onto the horns of the altar, this is continuing on. So Hiza al Taharai Shal Mizbeach Sheva Pa'amim. He would then, the Kohen Gadol would then, after he applied the blood to the corners, he sprinkled blood on what is described on a clean area of the altar 7 times. Clean area of the altar means that he would sprinkle the blood on the top. Actually, the blood would go onto the top of the golden altar. And the Kohen Gadol pushed the coals and ashes that were remaining on top of the altar, let's say from the ktaris, from the incense that was burned, to the sides, and then sprinkled the blood 7 times on the exposed gold. That's what he did. Okay. Now, Ushiari Adam, and the leftover of the blood, he would pour on the western base of the outer altar. Now, we're talking about now the leftover blood. I mean, not all the blood is going to be used up when you apply it to the corners, or all the other applications that were done with it. It's not going to use up all the blood for those things. And now the leftover blood was poured on what's called the western base of the outer altar. So on Yom Kippur, or on the other situations where the blood was applied to the corners of the inner altar, which we say after you did that, you would then apply the blood onto the top of the golden altar. Then with the leftover blood, he would leave the sanctuary where the golden altar was, walk through the courtyard, and then come to the outer altar, the altar that was situated in the chutzner, in the courtyard. Now, the altar that was built in the courtyard, which was known as Mebeach HaChitz, and the outer altar, was built upon a broad base. That's the word yisod, base, that extended 1 amma beyond the altar like a step. It expanded 1 amma. 1 amma is, let's call it about between 1.5 to 2 feet, beyond the altar like a step. The Kohen Gadol poured the remaining blood onto the western side of this base. This base went around the whole altar. And so he would this blood we're talking about would be poured on the western side of the space, because this was the side closest to him when he came out of the sanctuary building. The entrance to the sanctuary was on the eastern side. The Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, was to the western side of the Beis HaMikdash. The entrance was on the east. He was now going out of the Beis HaMikdash building into the courtyard. So that means he was going eastward. Therefore, when he was going eastward, which means that when he would now reach the altar, which side of the altar would he be reaching? He'd be reaching the western side of the altar. And therefore, he would go ahead, and because this side was closest to him when he came out of the sanctuary building, he therefore poured the oil onto the base on that side. And this is what would happen whether we're talking about Yom Kippur or any of the inner sin offerings, any of the sin offerings that the blood was applied on the inner golden altar. Okay, now Mishnah continues. And any of the sin offerings whose blood was applied to the horns on the corners of the outer altar, right? We have sin offerings, the blood is applied on the inner altar, sin offerings that the blood is applied on the outer altar. The blood of that was applied, the leftover blood of the outer altar after being applied to the horns on its corners, he would then pour on the base on the southern side. Now this is explained in the following way. Once he applied the blood of an outer chatas offering on the horns of the outer altar, the Kohen went down the ramp, which was to the south of the altar. He therefore poured the remaining blood onto the southern side of the base, since that side was closest to him. Okay, you're coming down the ramp was to the south. The closest side when he came down to the ramp that he would be reaching would be the south. The closest side that he would be to the south, and therefore he poured it on the southern the southern side of the yesod of the base that went around the altar. Okay. Both these bloods that we mentioned, whether they were poured on the western side, on the southern side, they joined in the canal that ran through the courtyard and flowed out to the Kidron Valley. These bloods, these bloods were poured onto on the base. They would come off the base, and then they would trickle into this canal that went through the Beis Hamikdash. That's what it means. Elu be'elu mis'arvin ba'ama. They would mix. They would join in the canal with the water that was there. The Yotzei Kidron, then go out to the Kidron Valley. That's where this canal led out to. At that point, they were then sold to gardeners for fertilizer. Blood is a good fertilizer. But were you to use this blood without paying for it, that would be considered me'ila. Me'ila means that's the prohibition of benefiting from something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. The Torah forbids having benefit from sacred items. Now, there's a very important, so the Mishna is saying that this blood is a sacred item. If you're just going to go ahead and benefit from it, that would be me'ila, that would be forbidden. And therefore, what you do is, the Beis Hamikdash, the ones in charge of the Beis Hamikdash, they would sell this property of the Beis Hamikdash, this that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, and once they sold it, the money, the sanctity transfers from the object that's being sold by the Beis Hamikdash to the money, and the money is sacred. It goes to the Beis Hamikdash, and the article is no more sacred. You can use it what you want for. So therefore, the Mishnah says that when we're dealing with this blood, it's going to be sold to the gardeners. And if you weren't to sell it to the gardeners and benefit from it, it would be me'ila. That's the prohibition. That's prohibition against benefiting from something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Now that they sold it, now that they bought it, they took the sanctity off of the blood, and they can now use it for their personal benefit of using it as a fertilizer. Now, one last point here is, and this is pointed out here in the notes, however, the biblical prohibition does not apply to the blood discussed here, since its service had been completed. The blood has already been done. The service with the blood has been done. Once the service is done, there's no more me'ila. That's the rule. It is forbidden only according to rabbinic law. This idea that there's a problem of me'ila, there's a prohibition to benefit from the blood, is a rabbinic prohibition, not a Torah prohibition. Have a great day.